Natural rocks do not change direction. They do not select a destination. They follow the path that gravity and momentum dictate, nothing more. But right now, as you listen to this, 3i Atlas is doing something that natural rocks simply do not do. It is heading toward a very specific place, and that place is Jupiter. Welcome to Cosmos Talks. On March 17, 2026, this interstellar visitor will reach a small moon called Euphemia, tucked deep within Jupiter's gravitational domain. The mathematics say this should be impossible. An object traveling from another star system should not be able to slow down enough to enter orbit around a planet. It should fly past at tremendous speed and continue into the outer darkness, never to be seen again. That is what physics predicts. That is what should happen. Certain government agencies have classified the relevant data, and the scientific mainstream keeps telling us it is all just coincidence. But I have looked at the numbers, I have studied the trajectory, and I am not convinced. This is not a casual flyby. This is not some random drift through empty space. What we are witnessing looks more like a planned arrival, a meeting that was scheduled long before any of us were born. Let me explain why this matters so much. When an object travels through our solar system, it follows predictable paths. Gravity pulls it toward massive bodies, momentum carries it forward. The combination of these forces creates a trajectory that we can calculate with remarkable precision. We have been doing this for centuries. It is the foundation of how we send spacecraft to distant planets. But 3i Atlas is not following a predictable path. It has shown what scientists call non-gravitational acceleration. That means it is speeding up or changing direction in ways that gravity alone cannot explain. Something else is providing the push, and we do not know what that something is. There is also the matter of its chemical composition. Spectroscopic analysis has revealed an unusually high ratio of nickel to iron in this object. In nature, these two metals typically appear together in fairly consistent proportions. When you find nickel concentrated by itself or in unusually high amounts, it often points toward industrial processes, refining, manufacturing, the kind of materials you might use to build something designed to survive an extremely long journey through the cold darkness between stars. Some researchers have suggested that the outgassing we have observed from 3i Atlas might actually be a highly efficient propulsion system disguised as a natural process. Others push back against this idea, arguing that we simply do not understand how comets behave when they travel through deep space. Both positions have merit, but here is what troubles me. Comets do not perform course corrections after passing the sun. They do not adjust their paths to reach targets millions of miles away. 3i Atlas did exactly that. It changed direction. It refined its trajectory. It made what looks very much like a choice. And that choice is leading it directly toward one of the strangest neighborhoods in our entire solar system. To understand why the destination matters, we need to talk about something called the Hill sphere. This is not a term most people encounter in everyday life, but it represents one of the most important boundaries in planetary science. The Hill sphere marks the region around a planet where that planet's gravity dominates over the gravity of the sun. Think of it as an invisible border. Cross that line, and you are in the planet's territory. Everything inside that sphere belongs to the planet. Everything outside still answers primarily to the sun. Every planet has its own Hill sphere. Earth has one, Mars has one, but none compared to Jupiter's. As the largest planet in our solar system, Jupiter commands an enormous region of gravitational influence. Its Hill sphere extends roughly 53.5 million kilometers outward from the planet itself. To put that in perspective, you could line up more than 4,000 Earths across that distance. It is a vast invisible bubble surrounding the giant planet, and 3i Atlas is on a trajectory to cross that boundary at approximately 53.6 million kilometers. Look at those numbers, 53.5 versus 53.6. The object is passing within 0.1% of the theoretical boundary. It is threading the needle with almost impossible precision. If you were driving a car at highway speed and managed to park it perfectly in an unfamiliar garage on your first try, people would be impressed. When an interstellar object does something equivalent across millions of miles of empty space, the precision becomes almost unbelievable. The closer you examine that number, the stranger it becomes. This is not the trajectory of a tumbling rock. This looks more like a pilot choosing a careful approach angle, a glide slope designed to achieve a very specific outcome. Here is why the Hill sphere matters so much for this story. If 3I Atlas wants to stay in Jupiter's system, if it wants to become captured as a moon, it has to slow down. Objects arriving from interstellar space are moving incredibly fast, far too fast to be gently caught by a planet's gravity. Imagine trying to catch a speeding bullet with a piece of silk without tearing it. That is the challenge. In the vacuum of space, there is no air resistance to create drag. There is no natural mechanism for an object to suddenly shed its kinetic energy just as it reaches a planet, unless it is heading for a direct collision which would destroy it. The only other option is propulsion, some way of actively slowing down. Avi Loeb, the Harvard astronomer, who has become a prominent voice in discussions about interstellar objects, has argued this point repeatedly. Unless 3I Atlas is fragmenting in some very specific and nearly impossible way, the only explanation for a stable capture is that something is providing thrust. Something is applying the brakes, and yet we see no massive plumes of gas, no visible rockets firing. What we observe instead is a silent, almost ghostly adjustment. The object is slowing down, but we cannot see how. Now let me tell you about where 3I Atlas is heading. It is not just approaching Jupiter in general, it is targeting a very specific group of moons called the Ananke group. These are not the famous moons you might have heard of. They are not Io with its constant volcanic eruptions painting the surface in shades of yellow and orange. They are not Europa with its smooth icy shell hiding a vast liquid ocean underneath. They are not Ganymede, the largest moon in the entire solar system, bigger even than the planet Mercury. The Ananke group is something else entirely. These moons are small, they are irregular in shape, more like jagged potatoes than smooth spheres. And most importantly, they orbit Jupiter in what we call a retrograde direction. That means they move opposite to the way Jupiter itself rotates. Every other major moon in the Jovian system follows the natural flow, spinning in the same direction as their parent planet. But the Ananke group goes against the grain. Picture a busy highway where thousands of vehicles are all moving in the same direction, and then suddenly you spot a small cluster of cars driving the wrong way. That is the Ananke group. They do not belong to the natural order of things. The official explanation for these moons is that they are captured asteroids, pieces of rock that wandered too close to Jupiter millions or billions of years ago and got trapped in its gravitational web. The retrograde orbit is explained by the angle at which they were captured. It makes sense on paper, but there is something strange about this group that has always bothered researchers who look closely. Despite all the missions we have sent to Jupiter over the decades, the Ananke group remains poorly documented. We have sent Galileo, we have sent Juno. We have taken thousands of images of the Jovian system, and yet these irregular moons appear in our data as little more than blurry pixels and faint dots of light. We know almost nothing about their surfaces, we have no detailed maps. It is almost as if they are hiding from us, as if they do not want to be examined too closely. Consider Euphem, one of the smallest members of this group. It measures only about 2 kilometers across, a tiny speck in the vastness of space. On March 17, 26, just one day after crossing Jupiter's Hill sphere, 3I Atlas will make a close approach to this tiny moon. Stop and think about that for a moment. An object has traveled across light years of empty space. It has crossed the unimaginable distances between stars, and its destination is a 2-kilometer rock that orbits backward around Jupiter. Why would anything make that journey to visit something so small and obscure? If you were looking for a place to hide something, a beacon perhaps, or a station, or a point of contact, would you not choose somewhere that nobody is watching? Somewhere that the natural flow of the system would help conceal? The retrograde orbit of the Ananke group acts almost like a cloaking mechanism. These moons move against the grain, they do not follow the rules, and that makes them very difficult to study. I find myself wondering if the Ananke group is really what we have been told, a collection of captured rocks drifting through the Jovian system, or if perhaps it is something else entirely, something that has been waiting for a very long time. The timing of this encounter adds another layer of strangeness. In January 2026, Euphem reached its apogee, that is the point in its orbit where it is farthest from Jupiter. It is as if this tiny moon stepped away from the crowd to meet the incoming visitor halfway. The mathematical precision required for this kind of orbital synchronization is extraordinary. It is like trying to hit a moving insect with a needle thrown from a mile away. The odds against it happening by chance are staggering. I keep coming back to the same uncomfortable thought. What we are watching might not be a random encounter. It might be a rendezvous, a handoff, the end of a long journey, and the beginning of a docking procedure. If 3I Atlas enters a stable orbit alongside Euphemine, the standard explanation for how irregular moons form falls apart completely. Rocks do not choose to join retrograde groups, they do not navigate across interstellar distances to park themselves next to specific objects. If that happens, we will have witnessed something that cannot be explained by natural processes alone, something that requires us to expand our understanding of what is possible in this universe. We have been tracking the object's light curve carefully over the past months. The light curve tells us how an object reflects sunlight as it rotates. Every tumbling rock creates a distinctive pattern as different surfaces turn toward and away from the sun. By studying these patterns, we can learn about an object's shape, its rotation period, and the composition of its surface. The data from 3I Atlas shows something unusual. There is a metallic sheen to this object, a reflective quality that is very difficult for natural bodies to maintain after traveling through space for millions of years. Cosmic radiation slowly degrades surfaces. Micrometeorite impacts create pitting and dust. The harsh environment of interstellar space weathers everything that passes through it. Natural objects should look worn, dull, ancient, but 3I Atlas looks too clean, too bright, too reflective. It is as if the surface was protected somehow during its long journey, or as if something recently woke up after a very long period of dormancy, like a machine coming back online after being shut down for centuries. The silence from the scientific community about this synchronization troubles me deeply. We are told it is coincidence, but in space, coincidences are often just mathematics that we have not been willing to acknowledge. When two objects in the emptiness of the void are moving toward each other with this level of precision, at some point we have to stop calling it physics and start calling it navigation. We have to consider the possibility that what we are seeing is intentional. There is a metaphor that has been circulating among researchers who study these phenomena. They call it the alligator paradox. It captures something important about how humans process uncomfortable information. Imagine two people standing at the edge of a river on a warm afternoon. The water is calm. The scene is peaceful. Both of them notice a long, dark shape floating in the water near the opposite bank. One of them glances at it briefly and says it is a log. Just a piece of driftwood carried by the current. Nothing to think twice about. They turn back to their conversation and forget about it, almost immediately. The other person keeps watching. Something about the shape bothers them. They notice what might be eyes at one end. They observe how the shape is moving slowly against the current, not with it. Logs drift with the water. This thing is moving on its own. A cold realization settles over them. That is not a log. That is an alligator. The person who sees a log is comfortable. A log is safe. A log is familiar. It fits neatly into their understanding of how the world works. Rivers have logs floating in them. Nothing unusual about that. You can go back to your picnic and enjoy the rest of your afternoon without a second thought. A log does not require you to change anything about your plans or your beliefs. But if it is an alligator, everything changes in an instant. You cannot go back into the water. You cannot let your children play near the shore. You have to accept that there is a predator in your environment, something with teeth, something with hunger, something that does not care about your comfort or your assumptions. The entire situation transforms from peaceful to dangerous with a single shift in perception. 3I Atlas is our alligator. We see the non-gravitational acceleration that defies every model we have built. We see the chemical signature with its unusual nickel concentrations suggesting industrial materials rather than natural rock. We see the precise targeting of a retrograde moon that orbits in the shadows where nobody pays attention. All the signs are there, all the evidence points in the same direction, but the institutions, the mainstream scientific voices, the official channels, they desperately want to call it a rock. They need it to be a rock. A rock is safe. A rock is familiar. A rock fits into textbooks without causing problems. Because if they admit it might be something else, if they acknowledge the alligator instead of the log, they have to admit that we are not alone. They have to rewrite the textbooks. They have to answer questions that have no comfortable answers. and that admission changes everything about how we understand our place in the universe. This is where the secrecy becomes troubling. There are reports that data related to 3I Atlas is being handled under protocols that date back to 1947. For those familiar with the history of unexplained phenomena, that year carries significant weight. It was the year of the Roswell incident, the year when something fell from the sky in New Mexico, and the official story changed multiple times before settling on weather balloon, the year when our relationship with the unknown changed forever. The year when secrecy became the default response to things that did not fit comfortable explanations. Why would a comet trigger secrecy protocols that are nearly 80 years old? Think about that question carefully. If 3I Atlas were simply an unusual but natural object, a chunk of ice and rock behaving in unexpected ways, why would anyone feel the need to classify the data? We share information about comets all the time. Amateur astronomers around the world track them and publish their findings. Scientific papers are written and peer-reviewed. The process is open and collaborative, but that is not what is happening here. Orbital coordinates are being redacted. High-resolution images are being classified. Information that should be freely available to researchers is being locked behind security clearances. These are not the actions you take when dealing with a snowball from deep space. These are the precautions you take when dealing with something that might have implications beyond astronomy. Something that touches on questions of security and perhaps even contact. The silence from official channels grows louder with each passing week. NASA says little. The European Space Agency offers no commentary. The observatories that should be competing to publish findings about this extraordinary visitor remain oddly quiet. And that silence itself is a kind of message. It tells us that what they are seeing does not fit the comfortable narrative. It tells us that decisions are being made about what the public should and should not know. You do not hide information about ordinary objects, you hide information about extraordinary ones. 3I Atlas is moving against the current of our solar system. It is heading toward a destination with purpose and precision. And all the while, we are being told to look away, to accept the comfortable explanation, to see the log instead of the alligator. But the evidence keeps accumulating. The object is clearly slowing down. Nature does not provide breaks. Rocks do not decelerate as they approach planets unless they are about to crash. And 3I Atlas is not crashing. It is arriving. If Avi Loeb and other researchers are correct, and a new moon is detected in Jupiter's system after March 17th, that will be evidence of technology. Not natural processes. Not lucky coincidences. Technology. Something built, something designed, something sent. We are living through days that future generations will study. The textbooks of 1,000 years from now may well include this moment. The arrival of 3I Atlas. The day when an object from another star chose to stay. I think about what this means for our understanding of ourselves. For centuries, we believed we were the only observers. We pointed our telescopes at the stars and assumed we were the only ones looking. We sent radio signals into the void, encoded with information about who we are and where we live, and waited for responses that never came. We convinced ourselves that the silence meant we were alone, that in all the vastness of the cosmos, across billions of galaxies and trillions of stars, we were the only ones asking questions, the only ones wondering about our place in existence. But what if the silence was never emptiness? What if it was patience? What if something out there has been watching us all along, waiting for the right moment to make itself known? What if the universe is full of intelligence, but most of it operates on timescales so long that our entire civilization is just a brief flicker to them? A few thousand years of recorded history means nothing to something that thinks in millions of years. The arrival of 3I Atlas is forcing us to confront these questions, not as abstract philosophy discussed in university seminars, not as science fiction scenarios explored in movies and novels, but as immediate reality demanding our attention. An object is approaching Jupiter right now. It is heading for a specific moon with precision that defies explanation. It is doing things that natural objects simply do not do, and we have to decide what we believe about that. Some will choose the comfortable interpretation. They will accept the official explanations, however strained those explanations might be. They will tell themselves it is just a weird comet, an unusual rock, an astronomical curiosity that will be explained eventually when we gather more data. And they will return to their daily lives without letting it trouble their sleep. There is no shame in that choice. The comfortable interpretation has served humanity well for a very long time. It lets us function, it keeps our worldview intact. It allows us to focus on the immediate concerns of jobs and families and daily survival, but others will look more closely. They will notice the details that do not fit. They will ask the questions that make people uncomfortable. They will refuse to accept explanations that require ignoring evidence. And they will watch with clear eyes as events unfold, ready to accept whatever truth emerges, no matter how strange that truth might be. I know where I will be on March 16, 2026. I will be watching the data, waiting for the telemetry, holding my breath as 3I Atlas crosses Jupiter's hill sphere and approaches its destination. Because if the map of our solar system is about to be redrawn, I want to see it happen. I want to witness the moment when everything changes. March 17th will either be remembered as the day when an interesting astronomical anomaly passed through Jupiter's system and continued on its way into the outer darkness, or it will be remembered as the day when humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos shifted forever. There is no middle ground here. Either 3I Atlas is a natural object doing strange things, or it is something else entirely. And by the end of March, we will know which explanation fits the evidence. I have spent countless hours studying the trajectory calculations, going over the spectroscopic data, reading everything I can find about irregular moons and hill spheres and gravitational capture. The more I learn, the more questions I have, and the biggest question of all is why so few people seem to be paying attention to what is unfolding right before our eyes. There is something profound about realizing how much larger the universe is than we were taught, how much more crowded it might be, how many secrets the darkness between stars might contain. For all our technology, all our telescopes, all our accumulated scientific knowledge over centuries of inquiry, we are still newcomers to this cosmic stage. Still learning the basic rules, still discovering who else might be in the audience, watching us take our first tentative steps. The solar system we thought we knew, with its neat categories and predictable behaviors, may turn out to be something far more complex. Not a museum of dead rocks and frozen gas, but a living harbor, a place where things arrive and depart, a place with visitors we never expected. 3I Atlas is a messenger. Whether it carries good news or bad, whether it brings answers or only deeper questions, it is forcing us to expand our understanding, to look beyond the comfortable explanations, to consider possibilities that our ancestors never imagined. The void is not empty. It never was. We just convinced ourselves of that because the emptiness was easier to accept than the alternative. But now something is crossing the darkness, something is approaching, something has chosen Jupiter as its destination. And when it arrives, when it settles among the irregular moons of that giant world, we will have to decide what it means. We will have to choose between the log and the alligator, between comfort and truth. I do not know exactly what 3I Atlas is. I cannot tell you with certainty whether it is a natural object, behaving strangely, or something constructed by intelligence beyond our comprehension. What I can tell you is that the evidence deserves our attention, the questions deserve answers, and the silence from those who should be investigating most loudly is itself worth examining. Whatever happens in March 2026, we will be here to document it, to analyze it, to share what we learn with anyone willing to listen. Because in moments like these, knowledge is the most valuable thing we have, and sharing it freely is how we honor the curiosity that makes us human. The universe has been quiet for a very long time. We built our civilizations in that quiet, we made our plans and dreamed our dreams, assuming the silence would continue forever. We developed our religions and philosophies based on the assumption that we were either alone or that any other intelligence was so far away that contact was impossible. We structured our societies and our sense of identity around being the only observers in a vast empty cosmos, but silence does not mean absence, it sometimes means waiting. And whatever has been waiting may finally be ready to speak. The quiet that we took for granted, that we built our entire worldview upon, might be coming to an end. Not with a bang or a dramatic announcement, but with a subtle arrival, an object sliding quietly into orbit around a distant moon where nobody thought to look. 3I Atlas is a messenger. Whether it carries good news or frightening revelations, whether it brings answers to ancient questions or only deeper mysteries, it is forcing us to pay attention. The void is not empty. It never was. We just convinced ourselves of emptiness because that was easier to accept than the alternative. The alternative being that we share this universe with intelligences we cannot comprehend, operating on timescales we cannot grasp, with purposes we cannot imagine. Thank you for joining me on Cosmos Talks. If you found this exploration meaningful, consider subscribing so you can follow along as this story develops. Hit the notification bell so you do not miss any updates as March approaches. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one of them. Share your theories about what 3i Atlas might be and what it means for our future. Because in this search for understanding, we are all in this together. No one has all the answers. No one can face these questions alone. The stars have been watching us for longer than we knew. Perhaps it is time we started watching back with clearer eyes and more open minds. The comfortable silence is ending, something is arriving, and whether we are ready or not, the universe is about to become a much more interesting place. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, keep asking the questions that matter, and keep looking up, because up there, among the moons of Jupiter, something extraordinary is about to happen. And we have front row seats to witness it.